It began, as these things so often do, with a whisper that slid through the corridors of London power like smoke, faint and fleeting, easy to ignore. At first, no one paid it any attention. The monarchy has survived centuries of whispers, after all. But this one was different. This whisper had teeth. It grew sharper with every retelling, louder with every passing day. Until one morning, before anyone inside Buckingham Palace had even realized what was happening, the whisper erupted into a storm. A scandal so shocking, so explosive, that it didn't just rattle the walls of the palace. It threatened to tear down the very foundations of the monarchy itself. A criminal investigation, a royal lawsuit, and at the center of it all, an international arrest warrant. With Meghan Markle's name on it. Yes, you heard that right. The woman, once hailed as the Duchess of Sussex, once paraded as the glamorous modern face of the monarchy, was suddenly no longer just a headline darling or a polarizing tabloid figure. She was a suspect, a fugitive in the eyes of international law, and the accusations against her weren't petty squabbles or gossipy slights. They were darker, more calculated, more dangerous, because this wasn't about who cried over a bridesmaid dress. This wasn't about petty rivalries or awkward family dinners. This was about betrayal. A betrayal so deep it crossed into the realm of the criminal. At the heart of the scandal, Catherine, Princess of Wales, future Queen of England, and on the opposite side, her estranged sister-in-law, Meghan. What began as a rivalry fueled by jealousy and cultural clashes had escalated into something no one could have ever predicted. Accusations that Meghan had orchestrated the illegal access, theft, and leak of confidential royal medical records. Not gossip, not speculation. Actual records. Files locked behind security systems and encryption. Files that contained private medical details about Kate herself, her daughter, Princess Charlotte, and even the late Queen Elizabeth II. The kind of information not even most members of the royal household had clearance to see. And now, suddenly, those files were trickling into the hands of journalists and podcasters halfway across the world. Every detail too precise to be rumor. Every leak more intimate, more invasive, more sinister than the last. But how did it come to this? How did two women who once stood side by side on the palace balcony, waving to cheering crowds, manage to descend into a feud so vicious, so all-consuming, that one ended up accusing the other of cybercrime? How did a story that once seemed like a fairy tale partnership, the Fab Four, as the press liked to call them, spiral into an international courtroom drama that could shatter the monarchy? To understand, we need to go back to the very beginning. When Meghan first stepped into royal life, it was supposed to be a golden age. William and Kate represented stability, tradition, the perfect model of a future king and queen. Harry and Meghan brought glamour, Hollywood sparkle, and the promise of modernization. Together, the four of them were meant to carry the monarchy into a new era, one that would silence critics and secure the family's survival for generations. But even then, cracks were forming. Kate had spent nearly a decade preparing for her role. She knew the rules, the codes, the silences that royalty demanded. Meghan, by contrast, came from a world where speaking out wasn't just encouraged, it was survival. She was outspoken, ambitious, unwilling to bow to traditions she saw as outdated or oppressive. The tension between them wasn't just personal, it was ideological. Meghan wanted change. Kate wanted preservation. Meghan wanted independence. Kate wanted unity. Two women, two visions colliding in a palace that wasn't big enough for both. At first, the tension was small. A tearful fitting before Meghan's wedding. Disagreements about protocol. Rumors about staff treatment. Each story magnified by tabloids until the public saw the cracks that had long been hidden. But it was 2020 when the dam finally broke. Harry and Meghan's announcement that they were stepping back from royal life, fleeing to California, blindsided the monarchy. Megxit, the press called it. To the palace, it was betrayal. To Kate, it was abandonment. To Meghan, it was liberation. From that moment, the canyon between them only widened. Interviews, documentaries, explosive books, they all became weapons in a war of words. But here's the thing about war. Once it begins, it rarely stays contained. And in this war, the unthinkable happened. Someone crossed a line. It started with whispers in the press. A journalist in America casually dropping a detail about Princess Charlotte's childhood health. A gossip blog referencing Kate's recovery after pregnancy. Little fragments of information too precise to be coincidence. And then came the biggest leak of all. A report about the late Queen's private treatment during her final months. The details were clinical, undeniable, and the palace knew instantly. These weren't rumors. They were leaks. Inside Buckingham Palace, panic spread like wildfire. Confidential information had been accessed. Not just gossip, but files. Real, protected, locked-away records. Someone had breached the walls. And when the palace cybersecurity team began digging, what they found sent shivers through the monarchy. The access logs didn't point to London. They didn't point to Windsor. They pointed thousands of miles away to California, to Santa Barbara County, to Montecito, home of Harry and Meghan. The intruder hadn't stumbled blindly through the system. They had moved with precision, straight to Kate's files, straight to Charlotte's, straight to the Queen's. They knew what they wanted, and they took it. And they took it. Coincidence? Impossible. The palace brought in top cybersecurity experts, tracing every log, every file transfer. The trail led to a Delaware-based shell company tied directly to Harry and Meghan's business network. From there, encrypted files were sent to a well-known American journalist, someone with close ties to Meghan's inner circle. Within days, those files appeared in print. The evidence was damning. Kate's private medical history, Charlotte's therapy notes, the Queen's treatment records, all suddenly out in the world, and Meghan's name was attached to every trail of evidence. For Kate, it was the ultimate betrayal. For years, she had endured Meghan's barbs, the Oprah interview, the Netflix specials, the constant insinuations that the monarchy, and by extension Kate, had been cold, unwelcoming, even cruel. But this was different. This wasn't spin or opinion. This was theft. This was an attack on her daughter, her grandmother-in-law, herself. Kate's reaction, according to insiders, was both devastation and fury. And for the first time in her royal life, she decided to fight back. She didn't go to the palace press office. She didn't complain to courtiers. She went straight to lawyers, a team of the sharpest legal minds in Britain, including former Crown prosecutors. Together, they built a case. Every timestamp, every file transfer, every encrypted email, a mountain of evidence so precise, so detailed that it couldn't be explained away as coincidence. The complaint was filed quietly at first, but once it hit the desks of international authorities, there was no turning back. The charge? That Meghan Markle had unlawfully accessed and disseminated confidential royal medical records. A crime under British law, a crime under European data protection law, and yes, a crime under American law too. When the case went public, the world gasped. Meghan's camp denied everything, of course. Her lawyers called it a smear campaign, a vindictive witch hunt designed to silence her. Her allies insisted it was fabricated, that Meghan was being scapegoated yet again. But the evidence, it spoke louder than any denial. And then the unthinkable happened. After weeks of quiet negotiations between British and American authorities, an international arrest warrant was issued. Not just for questioning, for prosecution. And the name printed on that warrant was Meghan Markle. The world erupted when U.S. federal agents intercepted Meghan at a New York airport. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. Agents calmly escorting her away as stunned travelers whispered her name. Within hours, the headlines blazed across the globe. Meghan Markle arrested. Kate versus Meghan explodes into criminal case. Royal war becomes international scandal. But here's the thing, that arrest was just the beginning. Because as investigators dug deeper into the digital footprints, they discovered something that made the entire case even darker. Meghan hadn't acted alone. Someone inside the palace had helped her. An insider with access to the very systems she was accused of breaching. The betrayal wasn't just external. It was internal. Who was the insider? Why would they risk everything to help Meghan? And what else had been leaked that the world didn't yet know about? One clue emerged in the metadata of a leaked file. a Logan timestamp that matched the schedule of a senior royal aide. An aide trusted with both Kate's and the Queen's most personal information. The investigators began to circle suspects. But here's the chilling part. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that some of the stolen files touched on more than health. Some of them touched on matters of national security, state secrets, political briefings, information that had nothing to do with family feuds and everything to do with the safety of the realm. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Meghan versus Kate. This wasn't just about two women locked in a bitter feud. This was about the monarchy itself. A monarchy now staring down the barrel of its greatest crisis in modern history. And as the trial loomed, with Kate's legal team preparing to face Meghan's in a courtroom that would captivate the entire world, one question remained unanswered. Who was the insider? Because if Meghan truly had help from inside the palace, then the betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It meant the monarchy wasn't just fractured. It was infiltrated. And the most terrifying part? Some say the insider hasn't just been found. They're still inside, still working, still leaking, still waiting for their moment to strike again. So, as Meghan's case unfolded, and as Kate prepared to take the stand, the world was left with one chilling thought. If Meghan wasn't acting alone, then who else in the palace is part of the conspiracy? And what happens when the next leak drops? It began, as so many great scandals do, not with an explosion but with a whisper. A rumor drifting through London's corridors of power, carried in hushed tones across drawing rooms, private members' clubs, and the shadowy recesses of Fleet Street newsrooms. At first, it was nothing more than a murmur, the sort of idle gossip that the palace had learned to live with for centuries. The Windsors had weathered storms before. Affairs, divorces, secret recordings, and the occasional slip of the tongue that sent courtiers into a frenzy. But this was different. This whisper grew teeth. It burrowed into the foundations of Buckingham Palace, gnawing at trust, loyalty, and the delicate balance of public perception. And when it finally surfaced, it didn't just spark another royal drama. It detonated into what would be called the scandal of the century. A criminal conspiracy, a courtroom reckoning, and the collapse of reputations built on years of carefully constructed myth. At the center of it all were two women whose stories had become inseparable in the public mind. Catherine, Princess of Wales, the polished future queen, beloved by much of the British public, and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, the Hollywood outsider who had once been hailed as a breath of fresh air, only to become the monarchy's most controversial figure. Their feud had been tabloid fodder for years, reduced in its simplest form to a spat about bridesmaid dresses and tears in the run-up to a royal wedding. But that narrative, as it turned out, was merely the opening act of a much darker saga. What began as a personal clash over petty details would evolve into something far more sinister. A battle over privacy, power, and ultimately survival itself. For months, the palace had remained silent, clinging to its motto of never complain, never explain. But the silence was deceptive. Behind gilded gates, investigators were working quietly, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that pointed towards an unimaginable betrayal. When the first allegations broke in the press, that sensitive royal files had been accessed without authorization, few took them seriously. Leaks were common. Missteps happened. But then came the details. Not just leaked schedules or throwaway anecdotes, but something far more invasive. Private medical records. Files that should never have been accessible outside strict channels had found their way into the hands of journalists and commentators, weaponized in ways that seemed too coordinated to be accidental. The initial suspicion fell on nameless insiders, the staffers who moved silently in and out of royal households, privy to schedules and secrets. But as the investigation widened, digital fingerprints began to point elsewhere. And soon, shockingly, the trail began to wind its way back towards Meghan Markle herself. At first, the suggestion seemed absurd. She had her flaws, certainly. Ambition, sharp elbows, a knack for generating headlines. But could she really have orchestrated something so deliberate, so destructive? The palace remained cautious, unwilling to fuel speculation. But prosecutors pressed on. They followed the logs, the timestamps, the encrypted communications, Piece by piece, the mosaic came together, and what it revealed was devastating. To the outside world, it still looked like a family feud blown out of proportion. Meghan insisted she was the victim of harassment, of racism, of a palace machine determined to crush her. She positioned herself not as a criminal but as a whistleblower, a truth-teller exposing an archaic institution. And for a time, her strategy worked. American media, ever eager to champion the underdog, amplified her claims. Celebrities rallied in her defense, tweeting hashtags of solidarity. Streaming platforms fast-tracked sympathetic documentaries, painting her as a modern woman at war with outdated traditions. For weeks, the narrative seemed to tilt in her favor. But here lay the problem. The courtroom is not swayed by hashtags, nor softened by celebrity endorsements. The courtroom cares only for evidence, and the evidence against her was damning. Thousands of pages of digital records, sworn testimony from a palace insider who admitted to stealing files at her direction, emails that spoke not of whistleblowing but of weaponizing personal pain. Once the medical angle goes public, sympathy will shift, read one message attributed to Meghan. Another, they've controlled the narrative for too long. Now we control it. Chilling, calculated, and devastatingly clear. Kate herself said nothing publicly. She remained a figure of poise, appearing at engagements with her trademark composure, her silence speaking louder than any statement could. But those close to her revealed the private toll. The humiliation of knowing her most personal struggles had been dragged into the spotlight, not by faceless tabloids, but by her own sister-in-law. The betrayal cut deeper than anyone could imagine, because this wasn't about gossip. This was about trust. It was about humanity. The pre-trial hearing changed everything. In a packed London courtroom, prosecutors laid out the evidence with forensic precision. They presented the damning emails, the decrypted messages, the voice recording in which Meghan allegedly laughed about making Kate squirm. They unveiled the testimony of the insider, who admitted to accessing and delivering confidential files at Meghan's request. The defense tried to dismiss it all as unreliable. A palace smear campaign, the desperate machinations of an institution threatened by Meghan's courage. But the judge was unconvinced. The ruling was brutal. The case would proceed to a full trial, not as a civil matter, but as a criminal conspiracy prosecution. From that moment, the story was no longer tabloid fodder. It was history. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, once a darling of the public, now stood accused of crimes that carried the possibility of prison time in the United Kingdom. She was ordered to remain in the country pending trial, effectively trapped in the land she had once so publicly fled. The irony was not lost on anyone. The trial itself was a spectacle unlike anything the monarchy had ever endured. Cameras lined the streets. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse. The world tuned in, transfixed. Kate arrived first each morning, composed, her navy suits and calm demeanor reinforcing her role as the wronged yet dignified victim. Meghan arrived later, swarmed by flashbulbs, her face hidden behind sunglasses, her once radiant smile replaced by tight-lipped silence. Inside, the prosecution built their case brick by brick, the timeline of the breach, the encrypted messages, the insider's testimony, the damning voice recording. Each piece added weight to the narrative of deliberate, malicious intent. The defense, in turn, tried to paint Meghan as a whistleblower, exposing hypocrisy within a taxpayer-funded monarchy. They invoked racism, sexism, media intrusion, the crushing weight of an archaic system. But, no matter how passionately they argued, they could not erase the evidence. The most dramatic moment came when Meghan herself took the stand. Under cross-examination, she insisted she had never ordered the theft of files, that her only goal was truth, that she had been framed by a palace desperate to silence her. But when confronted with her own words, the emails, the recordings, her answers faltered. "Did you or did you not write this message?" The prosecutor asked. A long pause. "It appears I did." It was the pause that broke her defense. The jury deliberated for days. The world held its breath. And when the verdict was finally read, it was devastating. Guilty on every major count. Unlawful acquisition and dissemination of protected information. Conspiracy. Data protection violations. Intent to defame. The Duchess of Sussex, once celebrated as a modern Cinderella, was now a convicted criminal. The courtroom gasped. Meghan closed her eyes. Kate exhaled, not in triumph, but in weary relief. But the story did not end there. Meghan's legal team immediately filed an appeal, claiming bias, procedural errors, even royal interference. The move reignited speculation, but the momentum had shifted. Her empire crumbled. Partnerships dissolved. Hollywood distanced itself. Even some of her most ardent defenders grew silent. The woman who once commanded global attention was now radioactive. And yet, just when it seemed the saga had reached its end, one final revelation shattered the illusion of closure. In the days following the verdict, a leaked report emerged, one that had been suppressed during the trial. It suggested that the breach had uncovered not only Kate's private records, but something far more explosive: correspondence between senior royals and government officials, communications hinting at deals, cover-ups, and secrets buried deep within the institution. Evidence that Meghan's team had allegedly intended to use not just against Kate, but against the monarchy itself. If true, it meant the palace had narrowly avoided catastrophe, and that Meghan's conspiracy, while criminal, had touched on truths the monarchy had fought for decades to keep hidden. Whispers spread that the crown had been shaken, not strengthened by the scandal. And the question on every lip was simple: if these secrets ever surfaced, would the monarchy survive at all? Because in the end, the scandal was never just about bridesmaid dresses or even stolen files. It was about power. Who wielded it? Who abused it? And who was willing to burn the world to the ground to claim it? And as Britain reeled from the most shocking royal scandal in living memory, one chilling truth lingered. Meghan Markle may have lost the battle, but the war for the soul of the monarchy had only just begun. Only just begun. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals, one scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.